Yep. That's the technical term, yep. Good morning. A death has occurred, and everything is changed by this event. We're painfully aware that life will never be the same again, that yesterday is over, and that relationships once rich have ended. But there's another way to look upon this truth. If life went on the same without the presence of the one who has died, we can only conclude that that life we remember made no contribution, filled no space, and meant nothing. The fact that that person left behind a place that cannot be filled is as high a tribute to this individual, because life can be the same after the loss of a trinket, but it's never the same after the loss of a treasure. There's a verse in the Bible that says, "For where your treasure is, this is where your heart will be also." And I'm overwhelmed because it's obvious from me, the people gathered here today, that Chester Clark Dobson Jr., also known as Chet, Dad, Daddy, Grandpa, and Big Boy, was a treasure in all of our lives, and our hearts are broken. It's an important day when we take this time to stop and acknowledge the importance of a life lived and the difference that they made every day in the world. And I know it's not necessary, but I want to thank each of you for being here. You traveled from near and from far to be a part of this celebration. And whether you're here to support one of us or because of your relationship with my father, it shows that he had an impact on your life. Today is Dad's day. He was never happier than when he was surrounded by his family and friends. He loved a good celebration, and this is a celebration. The moments we share today will be a time to offer support to each other, a time to laugh, and a time to cry. But please remember that when those tears do come, remember the words of the author Washington Irving. He said, "There is a sacredness in tears. They are not a mark of weakness. They are power. They speak more eloquently than 10,000 tongues, and they are messengers of overwhelming grief and unspeakable love." To begin our time today, I'm going to ask longtime family friend A.J. Devlin to come up and begin our time with a prayer. I also understand if you get him in a corner, he does a mean imitation of my father. So, as soon as A.J. finishes, we will have military honors performed by the United States Army Honor Guard to acknowledge my father's service to his country.
Let's pray. God, we pause now to acknowledge your presence here among us today as we celebrate Chet's life. God, as Job so eloquently said, the Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. God, we come before you both in celebration today and in pain and sadness. And so, God, we both acknowledge that you have given Chet to all of our lives, and that at the same time you have taken that away. And Lord, you are in control. You are our Lord. So, God, we submit that to you today. God, we acknowledge that you are Lord of all we see and do. We want to give you praise today in the midst of this time. And we thank you. We invite your Holy Spirit to come be here as the great counselor to comfort our souls, help us to celebrate, to honor, and to grieve. So God, we give you this day. We lift up our hearts to you on this day in the name of Jesus. Amen.
ask everyone to stand if they're able and place their hands over their heart for military. So today, I'm going to have several people share memories. My Uncle Terry's going to start, followed by me, so you will be nice and sick and tired of me by the time the service is over. Then my brother will share, Chet, and then R.C. Douglas, Julie's son will share, and my stepbrother, and my friends. So my Uncle Terry and my younger brother will start us, my Uncle Terry will start us over, and I asked them to share memories of Dad. And in a while, I'm going to ask everyone here to share a word that reminds them of my father. If you wanted to say why that word describes him, you're welcome to do that. If not, you can just say the word. Liam, you can say you didn't know him, okay? So I'll ask everyone to do that. So when I told Terry and Chip that I wanted them to use a word, they both said they needed more than one word. I don't know if that meant they were overachievers or they just couldn't get it done. I'm using one word, but Terry's going to start us off.
Didn't you know that she asked me to speak right after Mike Taft's including ceremony and then after her opening remarks? First thing I want to say is I am so thankful today for family, friends. I can warn you that while I want this to be uplifting, I am a Dobson. Those are famous for being emotional. So if I get that way, bear with me. For all of us, the past 3 weeks have been times of sadness as each of us has looked back and thought about Chet. But today is a day for celebrating his life and rejoicing that he was part of our lives. Today, let's not be sad because he's gone. Let's rejoice that we had him with us as long as we did. After Chet passed away, those of us who were there, we talked about what a memorial service or a celebration might look like. And we thought that there would be those who wanted to speak and some who wanted to say something but were not comfortable speaking more than a few words that describe their feelings about Chet. But maybe each speaker can pick one word that best describes their relationship to Chet. Since I'm the one here who knew Chet the longest, I took the liberty of choosing 4 words. I just took that on myself. And the first word, as was already mentioned, is big boy. Growing up in a deaf family, each of us children had sign names. For example, Frank was an F over the heart. Mine was the T over the heart. Alan, our stepbrother, was Alan. Patsy, Pat, was a P going across the chest. Now I need help. I've forgotten yours. Dennis, D over the heart. And Libby, the lid was an L. So as you can tell, the heart was important. But we didn't have a name for Chet. Chet was not given a sign name. He was just called Big Boy. When Dad told us to do something, follow Big Boy. What are you going to do? Whatever Big Boy tells you to do. And I kind of feel like, Chet's always been one looking out over us. And I brought a picture. I don't know how you can see it. It's in the little video over there. But this is Chet watching over, at the time, his 2 younger brothers. And I kind of feel like he's still watching. So we called him Big Boy out of our respect for him and knew that his decisions and his directions were intended for our good. He led by example. The second word that came to my mind was standard. Growing up, Chet was the standard for behavior. Right or wrong, he set that standard. He set the standard for academic excellence. I ended up with that one too. I apologize for that. He set the standard for work. I can't remember a time when Chet didn't work or wasn't looking for work. In his early years, he worked as a caddy. When he was in high school, commuting, hitchhiking back and forth to school. He would work at the public library in Washington, D.C. and come home late at night. After a stint in the U.S. Army, he worked as a dorm parent and a coach for prep students at Gallaudet College in Washington, D.C. Before he worked full-time as a ticket agent for Eastern Airlines at what's now Ronald Reagan Airport in Washington, D.C., at the same time attending the University of Maryland and majoring in chemical engineering, and then working over 30 years with Procter & Gamble. All the while, he was setting the standard for what a husband should be, what a father should be, what a family should look like. He was a very dedicated family man. I want to be that kind of man. My third word is tough. Chet never played a high school sport. He was certainly competitive. Whenever I was with Pat and Chet and the kids, we spent hours, literally hours, playing things like Yahtzee, Mr. Tippett, Trivia Pursuit, and other games. I even tried once to play bridge with he and Pat. That was a mistake. Yeah, it was a bad idea. Chet did not play to lose. I feel confident telling you that, well, I watched him once play basketball for a league or something in Cincinnati. I don't know if it was a work league or a community league, I'm not sure. But I was watching him play basketball. And I feel confident in telling you that Chet was not the fastest player on the team. He was not the tallest player on the team. And he was certainly not the most skilled player on the team. But I do promise you that no one played harder and with more heart than he did. In the past 15 to 20 years, Chet has had to deal with some pretty tough issues. The loss of his first wife, Pat, strokes, heart attacks, stents, bladder cancer, and subsequent issues that related to that surgery. And through it all, with the help of his second wife, Julie, he didn't just persevere, he lived life to the fullest. What would have stopped many men in their tracks became just another obstacle for Chet to overcome. Trips to South America, to the Middle East, to Australia, and other places were routine. Through it all, he was there for his children and his grandchildren. Proud of each one of them. In 2010, when our brother Frank passed away, and Chet was dealing with serious health issues of his own, who did we so turn to for guidance, directions, and leadership? You guessed it, Big Boy. You see, Chet was always our family home. He never failed us. Finally, the word of the Bible. Growing up as a kid, I had lots of idols. Roy Rogers, Gene Autry, John Wayne, and yes, even Elvis Presley. But those were just pretend idols. My real idols were Frank and Chet. I looked at them, that's who I wanted to be. As we look around this room, we feel Chet's presence, what a life he led, what a legacy he's given to each of us. And I close how I began. Don't be sad because he's gone. Rejoice. Rejoice that he was here.
Please sit. Welcome. I read a quote that said that Christmas is a bridge. We need bridges as the river of time flows past. That today's Christmas is me creating happy hours for tomorrow and reliving those of yesterday. I know that all of you, like me, have been working to take all of your memories of my dad in the last few weeks and to find a place to put them. The word I chose and I chose one word. The word I chose was Christmas. Because I don't think you can talk about my father's life without his relationship to his family and the Christmas holiday. As a child, it was all about the preparation for Christmas. Talking about it, thinking about it, planning for it, decorating the house, putting up the lights. Dad was meticulous. And then one year I came home, and I was 9 years older than Chet. And I came home, like, what the heck did Dad do with the Christmas lights this year? But he let Chip put the Christmas lights up, and he was not going to change them. The annual pilgrimage to get the Christmas tree, complete with very bad renditions of the 12 Days of Christmas. Dad had very specific ideas on what a Christmas tree should be, and that was a Scotch pine. And the shopping. Dad was always the first one out of the house on Black Friday, looking, of course, for any deal he could get. I don't think they had coupons, but if there had been, my dad would have had a coupon. Every year he would brave the traffic in search of the best deals. And it didn't end with the Friday after Thanksgiving. He would keep on shopping throughout the month. He would collect more presents than he planned to give, and before deciding which ones to wrap. And my dad didn't just put those presents under the tree in a box. He wrapped them with the precision of an engineer. Different papers, carefully worded tags, bows, buttons, ribbons, and they were gorgeous. They were works of art. We all got names. I was the #1 elf. They might have not been very creative names, but they were names. My mother was Mrs. Santa Claus. He would spend hours in the basement wrapping presents. By the time Christmas morning arrived, our living room was completely full of presents. On Christmas Eve, we would attend midnight mass and Dad would read the Christmas story. We'd go to bed with huge anticipation for the next morning. Many of you already know this, but we didn't just run down the stairs in the morning and just rip open our gifts. No, we had to sit and wait till we were called. Then we got to go down and look at our stockings. Our stockings were full of everything from oranges to money, even lottery tickets one year. Did we open up? Then we could open Santa Claus presents. They were unwrapped. Did we open our presents then? No. We had to sit and eat breakfast. So then we sat down to breakfast, which was always the same. Blueberry muffins from the annual Procter & Gamble gift basket, scrambled eggs, and sausage. As we got older, Debbie and I would make sure there were mimosas in the mix, but they were not included when we were younger. Then there would be stacks of cards at everyone's table. We all purchased a card. When my husband first went to Christmas at my parents' house, he said, "I don't understand the card thing." But we would all have cards. And my dad has been described as not being overly sentimental, but some card would send him over the edge and the tears would start to flow. And every year, invariably, with all the cards that are out there, 2 of us would give him the exact same card. Then we would open presents one by one, from the oldest to the youngest. And this was Dad's favorite part. He loved to watch all of us, from my mom to the kid, each one of us kids, open our presents. Then there would be the look on his face when he realized he had given me a present meant for Debbie, or Debbie a present meant for me. And he would just always be incredulous. Like, he didn't do that. Somehow the presents had just swapped themselves underneath the tree. As we got older, he kept the other items that he had purchased, but decided not to give us. And after all the presents were over in the afternoon, he opened up what he called the store. And we had the opportunity to exchange a gift or to buy one out of the store. He was not going to let a good bargain go to waste. Christmas also gave my dad an excuse, not that he really needed one, to just sit and watch TV. Whether it was some random football game that he didn't care about the teams, he just always rooted for the underdog, or it was one of the favorite family Christmas movies. Whether it was White Christmas, it was The Bishop's Wife, the original, not the remakes, A Christmas Carol, but only the one without stair steps, Fitzwilly, or one of his favorites, but harder to come by, Come to the Stable, which I really think he just liked to look at Loretta Young. I really don't think it was the movie. And one of my favorite memories of my dad, though, and my dad's unconditional love and support, came not at Christmas, but at Thanksgiving. My mother was recovering from one of her many surgeries, and I came home for Thanksgiving and said that I would prepare Thanksgiving dinner to take the burden off of her. I had just moved to California. No offense, but I was a little arrogant. And I felt the need to improve on the traditional family dinner. So I took my newly acquired silver palette cookbook, and I made pumpkin soup that I put in little mini pumpkins. I made turkey with Grand Marnier stuffing, and a few other not Dobson familiar dishes. I realized that when Chip got up to make stovetop stuffing in the middle of dinner, that you just don't mess with tradition. But my dad ate every bite, and he pretended to enjoy it, even though I knew that he missed my mother's traditional dinner in more ways than one. I am so fortunate that I had a father so capable of expressing his love for our family and for me. And although he will be forever missed, and I know that sometimes he didn't feel like he accomplished as much as he should have in life, but in his family's eyes, he accomplished more than he will ever know. Daddy, I will hold you in my heart forever. I love you, and I am grateful that I was your daughter. Your turn, little bro.
I don't teach math, but I'm quite sure that was more than one word. When we went through and Heather informed me of the parameters of today, she was very precise about the one word. And I said, well, I've already written it, and I have a lot of words, and it's not quite tidy like that. She was emphatic that there is a theme, and you must follow said theme. I don't know that I did that. I'm a teacher. I talk extemporaneously all day, and so I've written everything down, and I don't know that that's going to happen, so I'll do my best. When I think of my dad, I think of many different images. I think of him when I'm a young man, young boy, as the husband, the father, and the worker. And then in my 20s and 30s, I think of him when he was retired and happy, and just spending like I'd never seen him spend before. I didn't understand where that came from. And most recently, in his 70s and into his 80s, I remember him kind of struggling in health, but determined to show Julie, his new bride, the best life he could. Traveling the world, continuing to just do things to the best. And it was fun to watch. When I think of him back as a young boy, I think of golf. And he golfed, and he golfed, and he golfed. Some of you may not know him, because he wasn't really able to do that later with balance issues. But as a man in his 30s and 40s, and even into his 50s and 60s, he golfed and golfed and golfed. He would golf 27 holes, 36 holes, 45 holes. He would golf early in the morning and into the night. I don't know if you remember, they came out with these glowing golf balls at one point. He golfed with the glowing balls into the night. He was not satisfied with only golfing during the day. He read books about golf. We had several golf magazine subscriptions. He worked on golf clubs in the basement. He putted throughout the house. He went to golf lessons, which he didn't really follow their instructions. But he did all of those things to try to get better. And at one point, he got very good. He, I think, at one point got his handicap down to a 9. And if you know golf, 9 is very good. I was with him on many occasions when he shot in the 70s on a real 18-hole golf course, not Green Hills, but a real golf course. And everything he did it full steam ahead. Whether it was golf or life, it was full throttle. And somebody mentioned, I think Uncle Terry mentioned before, living life and life to the full. There's a verse in John chapter 10, verse 10, and it says, I've come to give you life and life to the full. And that's the way Dad was. He was full throttle in conversation, in golf, in family, in Christmas, in everything. It was 110 miles an hour. Not driving. That was below the speed. As a young man, as has been mentioned, he studied at the prestigious Middlesex Academy, where he did very well, and he was very proud of that. He went to the University of Maryland, studied engineering, while he went third shift at night. working at Eastern Airlines. Again, not an easy task. He got married, went full throttle with Procter & Gamble, traveled the world, countries all over the world, brought home all kind of fun trinkets from all over the world for me as a young boy. But all of that was really secondary to who he was as a man. When I think of my dad, I kind of think of three words. I think of integrity, I think of drive, and deep thought. And I'll kind of unpack those a little bit. As a young man, and even into my 20s, 30s, and 40s, my dad emphasized at every turn to do the right thing, to do the exact right thing, to do it to the letter of the law. When you golfed, if you marked your ball, you put it exactly where the mark was, and you didn't improve your lie, and if you did, you took the stroke penalty and more, and maybe even more. When he did his taxes, and I would call him sometimes for tax advice, he would tell me every detail, more than I wanted to know or fathom of tax law, the specifics, the nuances, and when this deduction and that claim, and cost basis. So, and as a 23-year-old, I was swimming. And he did that at every turn. Basketball, as Uncle Terry said, he was not great, but he played hard. I still remember the first time I beat him in one-on-one, and I felt terrible. And I think I charged him at one point too, and he took the charge well. I think of him in this way, with this full throttle and everything. I think of him with integrity. I think of him, and also I mentioned the deep thought. And I think AJ might touch on this later, but if you've ever seen my dad, when he's thinking, there is a forehead rubbing. And I'm not sure, maybe that's why all the hair was gone from here, but there was an intense rubbing. And it was when he was thinking on the phone. I still just remember him reading off a credit card number or spelling his name with such vigor, eyes closed, just going through it, deeply thinking. And you never knew what my dad was thinking. There were so many things going on in his head. He might have been thinking about his next round of golf, something with the family that needed to be addressed, maybe something in specific tax policy or what have you. It may have even been the next thing he wanted to record on TiVo, which was very important to him to make sure that everything was recorded. I remember his first VCR when he tried to learn how to record with that, and he was constantly frustrated with the labeling, and things were labeled and they weren't labeled correctly. And he put it in and it wasn't golf, it was something altogether different. Very disappointing. This deep thought, some of you know, kept him up at nights, unfortunately. He struggled with insomnia, but he was always going. Even with insomnia in the middle of the night, he didn't just sit there and stare at the sky. He played solitaire. He balanced the checkbook. He worked through Quicken. He took care of every letter, every birthday card, Christmas card. He was always moving in that regard. I have so much respect for my father, it's hard to express it in a few minutes. Heather said 5 minutes. I'm quite sure that both Heather and Uncle Terry have violated that. I'm going to try. But I have so much respect for him that it's hard for me to express it. When I was young, I marveled at how he knew everything, whether it be things around the house, geopolitics, the world around you, cars, anything. I was just amazed. He would scour the newspaper for hours in the morning on a Saturday or after work. He would come home, sit in the ugly green chair, and read the newspaper with great detail, and then recall opinion articles hours later, days later, and if something was 4% less, it did not escape his eye. He would go and buy it because it was that. He would return the other one and get the 4% difference, driving to Van Lumen's across town. These are the things I think about with my dad, the deep thought, the integrity, and the full drive. He did this with his family as well. He did that with me as a young boy through my many mistakes. He did that with my sisters, no mistakes. He did that with everyone in our family. When I got married, he loved my wife, Kathy. Was doing well, right? He loved her just as if she was one of the family. He was great. He also was the same way with my boys. when I called him to tell him we had a son and we were naming him Chet, he was thrilled and couldn't have been prouder. He showed the same love and zeal for Luke and for Jake, cuddling them, loving them, doting upon them. Family was always important. Even now, in the last 20 years, every phone call to California, every time I'd call, he'd go through the checklist. How's Kevin? How's Chet? What's going on with him? What's going on with Luke? How about Jake? If he knew there was a trouble there, hey, did this work out? He would address that. And then he would go through the sisters. How's Debbie? Have you talked to her lately? What's going on there? How's Heather? What's going on there? And he would touch base with, how's AJ, your friends? And so, how's AJ's wife? Etc. He cared about family, and AJ's kind of extended family in some ways. I think of these things. I think of all the things that Heather talked about, the Christmases, all those things are my images. My dad was a great, great man. I love him. I miss him. I will miss him. But he provided so much vision to me for what it means to be a father, hopefully a husband, and to live a life of honor and integrity. Thank you, Dad.
So now I'm going to ask RC to come up, and we just, we feel so grateful to have your family as part of our family.
Jerry spoke to this. I'm going to build on it. Even before we met Joe, we were carpooling. And the first time I really got to know Joe was sitting down playing cards. So we would talk. We would speak over dinner. But I think that the real exchange, the real communication happened at the card table, which might frighten some people if you've ever played against Chet. Chet was very smart, very aggressive, but he was also very fair. In the game that we would play, at least later, was called Hearts. And in Hearts, the goal of Hearts is actually not to get hearts. And every time that you got a heart, it's considered a point. However, if you got all of the hearts and the Queen of Spades, rather than losing, you actually won. So the game flips on, so it turns around. And so to win at hearts, you have to play your hand, but you also have to play your opponents. And after he passed, I found myself thinking a lot about all the times that we played cards together. And here are some of the things that I learned playing cards with Chet. You have to be strong, but you also have to be resilient. Sometimes the cards do not go your way, and you have to have the stamina and perseverance to keep on going. You have to be optimistic. In order to find out what the next hand will bring, you have to keep playing. You have to see what comes next. Chet had the most amazing skill counting cards, right? So he would not only count any cards remaining in the suits, but he could actually tell you any cards that were still out there on the table. And it was a way of identifying opportunities, to finding out how can you play, what's available to you, what is the best play. By playing with Chet, I learned about patience, that we have to let the game unfold naturally, that you can't rush the game. I learned about equanimity, that sometimes you win, and sometimes you lose, regardless of the strength of your hand. I also learned, this might surprise you, but even if you don't have all the cards or all the right cards, it's okay to bluff sometimes. But the most valuable lesson I learned is to enjoy our time together, because we never know how long the game will last. Chet, you captured all of our hearts in the Queen. Thank you for our time together. We love you.
now I'm going to ask again AJ to come up to share a message with us.
Well, part of life is undoubtedly grief and pain, tears, and part of it is laughter too. And my hope is to bring a little levity to this situation in light of the honor. And I am just, I want to tell you my perspective, my paradigm coming into the Dobson family. So I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, and a little town called Green Hills, which many of you all have been to. Chip and I my last name is Debling, his is Dobson. We sat next to each other all the time. We were always in that line. And so all throughout in elementary school, we went to competing elementary schools and junior high together, and we were what you would call frenemies. Okay, so we were friends one day, enemies the next, but mostly, especially adversarial when we were in junior high. And so we sat next to each other in 8th grade, and we would just ruthlessly make fun of each other, mock one another openly, as only 8th graders can do. And so as we would banter back and forth, there was always talk about I was a little better with the ladies. Chip always had nicer clothes. That's kind of what it really came down to. So I would say, hey, you call any girls this weekend? Maybe your sister, and they'd laugh. He would say, where'd you get those shoes? Swallowed, or something like that. There would be some kind of exchange, and it was cutthroat, it was ruthless, and so when his banter went back and forth, finally this girl that sat behind Chip just kind of called it the timeout, which you typically don't do in 8th grade. This was really very astute for her. She goes, you two are driving us crazy. She said, you sit here and you bicker at each other, you make fun of each other, but you guys are so much in common. You wear the same stupid clothes, you listen to the same stupid music, you have the same stupid haircut, which was at the day a mullet. And why don't you just be friends and just quit driving us all crazy? And so we both kind of snickered, but then it was interesting because we both thought about it for a minute. We thought, maybe she's right. So we actually, from that day on, we've been best friends. And so here we are in our late 40s, and we still talk on the phone about once a week and get together a couple times a year, and have had the privilege of doing life together for a long time. So for me, my relationship with Chet is very much like one of the family, but as one of the little kids in the family. And so Chip and I were both the youngest child in our families, and so the youngest child typically is the clown, right? You're the entertainment. So that was us. We were the entertainment. But then Chip's parents were older than the typical parents, just in light of maybe it was a surprise. I'm not sure, but so when they were in our lives, like there wasn't a lot of strict parenting by the time when we were in 8th grade. We were kind of on our own at that point, and they would bring us in and tell us a few things, and then we would kind of snicker, and so a lot of my life in being involved in the Dobson family was observing. And so we would be kind of like the cynical observers of one another's lives. So we would say, tell me why your mom does this. Or have you ever noticed that your family does this? And that was kind of our little commentary. So one of the things I'm reminded of this morning that Heather's in charge, right? And I was reminded that if Heather and my mother ever joined forces, they could take over the world. So just reminded of that today. But one of the things that we would always, when it came to Chet, is we would tell one another funny things about our parents. Hey, my mom did this, or my dad always does this. And then with Chet, especially because he was a unique character, and there was lots of days he'd be driving us to the YMCA in this huge station wagon, and he had the seat back really far, and he was kind of looking out of the bottom of his glasses like this. And so, and he had a cup of tea in this orange cup, and I don't know why he always had the orange cup, and he's kind of driving like this. And all over the road, and so I would try to bait him with things to try to get him to talk about stuff that I knew he was passionate about, because as Chip said, he was very intelligent, very into the minutia of details, and we thought it was, frankly, hilarious most of the time. We tried to bait him, can we get him to talk about this? So Chip was telling me, hey, we went to McDonald's the other day, and my dad was so into the apple pie that he got that you just got to try to get him to talk about it. So of course, we're in 8th grade, we're going to basketball or whatever. And so I said, hey, I was thinking about going to McDonald's tonight, and I was thinking about maybe a dessert, and so he's not biting, he's just driving. Now, I didn't know if I should get maybe the cherry pie or the apple pie. What do you think, Mr. Dobson? And so then he would, jump in, and he would talk in this high, kind of a falsetto voice, well, apple pie, lots of spices, I don't know how they do it. It's like, I don't even, how do I get into that little cardboard box? I don't know, it's really genius. And so then we get snickering, laughing like that. So then, fast forward 20 or 30 years, and Costco, okay, so as any of us good Californians know, Costco, you go to church, you go to Costco, you have a home base, and so it was the apple pie at Costco that he was really into. I can't believe it, apple pie, yes, it's as big as a pizza, and so he had lots of interesting little quirks about him that endeared us to him, for sure, but when I think of Chet and Pat, they were more like parents, kind of other parents to me than a friend, or many of you guys are friends or family or whatever, but they were kind of surrogate parents to me, and for my parents too. For Chip, when we were actually, I think when we went to college, they graduated. They retired, moved to California, and you came and lived with, they left you, that's right, you came and lived with my parents. So there was, and then Chip would call me, did you know your mom plays the piano at 7 in the morning? Welcome to my life. So, anyway, I have this, when I think of them, they will always be, and Chet will always be more of a father figure in my life as well. And I would just echo what Chip said in terms of integrity, just in terms of a deep passion and care for us. We lived in a world that was different then than kids grow up in now. I don't know that we ever spent any time playing video games. We would just wander around in the woods behind their house, and they'd come back. When we come back in, they were always just welcoming and loving and celebrating us, I think is what I remember more than anything. And I had a chance to see Chet and Julie just within the last year. And again, he knew everything going on in my life. He knew what the latest diagnosis was with my wife's health and how she's doing, and tell me about this. And so I appreciate that love a lot. I want to read a couple of scripture verses today, and just in light of wanting to acknowledge God's presence in and amongst us. And that life, we never get to dictate what life will be like. We have no idea what God will throw at us, but we do have the opportunity to respond to that. Someone mentioned earlier Chet's determination, his grit, hanging in there through a lot of difficult things in life, but being determined and figuring out how to live life to the fullest. Chet went through, at a relatively early age, significant health issues with Pat, and supported her immensely, cared for her in the midst of that, which is a little bit of my story with my wife, and so I'm super thankful to be able to watch him do that and live in that in integrity and inspired by that. But again, just acknowledging during this time in his life, God's provision for us, God's care for us. And so I want to read a couple verses that I selected for today. So the first one's out of Revelation 21, verse 1 to 7. It says, Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, See, the home of God is among mortals. He will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more. For the first things have passed away. And the new one and the one who was seated on the throne said, See, I am making all things new. And he said, Write this, for these words are trustworthy and true. Then he said to me, It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty I will give water as a gift from the spring of the water of life. To those who conquer will inherit these things, and I will be their God, and they will be my people. And then my favorite psalm, which I know many of you also probably share this, is Psalm 23, and I'd like to read this in closing of my. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff comfort me. You have prepared a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, and my cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
So before I ask people to say a word about my dad, I want to clarify something. Chip was not a mistake. He was not a surprise. He was actually the only one of us that was planned. My parents did something very unique. They said, we can't afford a child after they'd had the first two of us. We really don't have the money to have a third child. But from the time that Debbie and I could speak, we knew that we would have a little brother. And we knew his name would be Chester Clark Dobson III, nicknamed Chip. We even had toothbrushes, like faces for him, even before he was born. My parents waited until they could afford a child. What a novel concept in today's world. They waited. The doctor continued to tell my mother, Pat, you have two girls. There's a very good chance it will be a girl. My mother never picked out a name for a girl. It was a boy. It was going to be a boy. And if she had changed that name, the sex of the child, literally in her womb, I think she did it. Because she just, from the very moment she even went into labor, it was a boy and it was named Chip. So I hope that for the people here, we appreciate you being allowing us to be indulgent with our sharing. We're glad you're here to share. But I thought now that I would start, and Scott, I'm going to pick on you, and I'm going to ask you to say a word about my dad, and maybe say who you are, just say a word about my dad, and if you want to just say something about it.
Well, the word is dedicated to family, to work, and to country. And I'm sad that's and my kids. Where do you?
Yeah.
So, I'm Debbie, I'm Chet's daughters. My word is protection. So, my father was very protective of me my whole life. When I was younger, made some decisions that he always worried about. And for some reason, he was always worried about me. And so, later, he would, every time I talked to him, he said, "I'm good. That I am good." And every time we talk to Scott, he's differently in my life. So for me, the word is protective. And I'm so thankful for my dad and for his love for me and what he taught me.
Julie Parsons. I have two girls.
There we go.
Which is try harder. There was always room to try harder. It was very useful.
Julie, I'm going to save you, okay? I'm going to let Kathy.
I'm Kathy and Chip's wife. My word is confident.
Dennis, Chet's youngest brother. Lived in Pittsburgh with him. He was almost 6 kids in the picture. And I'm a seventh. So for me, my word is respect. I never respected any man in my life. All the things he did, all the parenting, about there died young. He spent a lot of time talking to me on how life is going to be. And just the way he did things. I just want to say one thing that really stuck out to me when you talk to Chip talking about interest on taxes. When my other brother died, he had to do the executor. I never seen anybody who's complicated. And so complicated. And he's made it look so easy. And he had it itemized his medical statements down to the stamp. You have all stamps on there. I remember going to my granddaughter, little, and I showed her this. It's got the stamps on it. Who's that accurate? But that was my brother Chet. I just love him so much.
I'm on Dobson, Ontario's one. There were two words for me, love and acceptance. It's love and acceptance. I'm married to his three children, to the kids. It's like this. And he always showed Terry not love anytime we contact him.
Jay,
My name's Jane. Chapter 7. And my word is love.
Just for my word is 110%. Terry, that's it. It's always good for Christmas. Good chats. Oh, this is too many times, but it's consistent. It's always looks happening.
and Pat.
My name is Pat, and I'm Chet's sister, his stepsister. And I didn't know about my birthday, but they happy to meet Chet. I think the big boy, that's the way that said his family, we always refer to Chet as big boy. And I didn't really grow up with Chet. He was kind of older than me, so when he went home, I was still pretty young. But we had a lot of adventures when we were all together and all baseball. And I was the only girl. I with the four boys. And then Dennis came along, so the family got bigger and bigger. But Chet and his dad, stepmom, they spoiled me. I was the only girl, those that I met, nothing wrong. And I just,
Uncle Chuck, do you have a word?
just.
No?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's,
Chet's niece. My word would be intelligence and force. It's just
Kay, did you want to share a word?
yeah, I didn't check well, when I met him, just
Did you hear Kay said that he adored Julie? We all know that. No?
No, actually, I have two words. Sorry.
It's okay. I'm
There's
just
lots
let
of
go.
people breaking the rules here. One is tough. Oh my gosh, the things that, the medical problems he's had in the past, and he just kept getting through it, moving on, doing amazing. And my other word is I'm so grateful that he listened to this, because he brought her so much happiness, and they had such a good time together. They've been to so many places. I was really jealous.
So go.
Yeah.
Michael.
So, for those of you who don't know, Helen and I are neighbors, just on the street from Julie. I also have two. And I too didn't know Chet as well as his family does, obviously, but we were very happy Julie and Chet got together. One word that I just kept hearing stories about him were always generous, generosity. The other would be anchor. I really sense from just listening to all of this that he really had been the anchor with you.
Paul, PJ.
PJ?
Okay. Jackie,
All of my words have already been said, so I'm gonna repeat them.
that's fine.
Generous is one. Intelligent, I have called him for tax advice. And thirdly would be determined, because I once watched him and my husband carry a multi-100-pound hutch up a flight of stairs. With Julie giving directions from the ground floor. And I was certain they were both going to tumble over a railing that day, but they succeeded. It's amazing.
Come back to me.
Okay, your turn.
Okay. He was my uncle, but more my grandfather. And, I'd see the video. I can hear his voice.
You said you wanted to hear, you liked to hear his voice. Me too. I miss his voice. Miles, did you have a word?
I forgot to know it, but he sounds really nice.
He was. He was really nice. Libby.
I have a sentence.
Oh my God. My family, I swear.
No, I want Chet really. The last thing he said, which is my second, the thing I remember most was when he came to me and said, "Would you like to come and live with my family?" And that was it. I heard
Peter.
That's a mistake.
You did.
I'm thinking. I'd say integrity. We're going back a few years, but we played golf for years. Golf club over. Really young. I was the last to get ball, so Chet wanted me to just shot him 300 yards straight down the fairway. Mine were over there somewhere. And I wanted to have, I guess what I described as a mulligan. So the key, he looked at me like, what are you doing? And I said, I'm doing a mulligan to shoot myself. Oh yeah. With that ball. But let him move.
And I'm sorry, I don't know your name. I apologize.
I'm Arlene, actually, Julie was his wife's cousin.
Oh, thank you for coming.
I really wanted to. And Julie, it's been many, many years. I want to say the word that I think is right. And the reason for that, a lot of ways, is I lost my father earlier this year. So I totally get it. And I have to say, after 25 years, I think we haven't seen you, Chet, since the wedding or the shower. And there was this beautiful spray of flowers at my mother's wedding. And it's been so years. And that warmth that enveloped us when we saw that meant so much. And this one to the here today and for the warmth in this room. I really think it's just so awesome.
Thank you. Kristen. Amy.
Hi, I'm Davey, or and it's funny you said that because I was going to say my mother's voice, everybody's voice. Anybody can call me.
Courtney. Family. Brendan.
So we're coordinating with Jared, we're Scott's children, parents' stepchildren, and I remember calling Chet a few months ago, telling him that I was going to be married. So I remember the Christmas tradition, and we still do that, and we do all the cards. I think Chip kind of got a little bit of Chet's handwriting It's a little bit rough sometimes. Especially contrasted to Julie's signature. If you've ever seen Julie's signature, it is like the most incredible signature in the world. But the one thing I could always make out was love Grandpa Chet. It always existed. Just like it said.
Did you all want
Oh
to
wait,
share?
her word is gracious.
Did you want to share a word about Megan?
I sure would. Well, this great, original, great bass player. And the thing I remember about Chet more than anything else is when most of you that know me, I sing. And I was talking at the table at the bridge at Bernardo, and Chet was opposite me. I said, I have a wonderful privilege of singing for Christ gave me Sermon on the Mount in Israel with a group that went there. And I said afterward, they asked me if I would sing in the upper room. It was very meaningful of me being raised that way. And I said yes. And all the people joined in and sang, His name is wonderful. And Chet sat opposite me here. And I looked at him and he shook his head. He knew exactly how I felt about that. That's what I remember about Chet. He shared that.
Yeah.
My name is Laura's husband. I've been married. I've been married for years. Years. I feel like today's experience with you and your family is just the opposite. And as a matter of fact, that's the word I selected for discussing and describing mission. So I just regret that I did not know you and your family before this. I miss so much. But I will always remember you, all that you mean to me. What you gave me from your heart. God bless you.
My name is Alan Jacobson. I'm one of the bridge players. And the thing I remember most about Chet was his stick-to-itiveness. Anybody who could go over to Malaysia and build a plant from the ground up and transcend the politics, the corruption, the labor unrest, the difficulty in getting supplies, and get that plant up and running, had a lot of stick-to-itiveness.
My name is Man Kalapurade. I'm my wife. I just know Chet. So I great for him. The word that you want, say masterful, beautiful memory, and during the games when we were sitting playing with him, he would insert little stories of his life, fantastic details.
Yes. There was plenty of detail. Yeah.
Such a fantastic memory. And he would remember on the table, he played the most masterfully to the detail to the end. And he would remember every card that had been played. Every single card that had been played. I just man, wonderful man, beautiful. We always.
I'm going to keep us in touch with you, right? And I have to say, you really helped.
He did.
Yes. I mean, we really enjoyed our time with you. And today has been very nice to see everyone loving and
My name is Lou. I'm a bridge player with Chet. And I would say it was a tough confession.
Yes, he was.
Didn't like the blues.
Anything, not just bridge.
And I'm Roseanne Carroll, his wife, and I think of Chet, I think not just Chet, I think of Julie, it's a team. And they were both competitive in marriage, not just Chet. I'm thankfully here myself then. We had many wonderful times with Chet and Julie. I think of Chet as an inspiring example of what all of us could be with work hard. I have to say something about Julie. When Julie sprung,
Mary Jane James. I am Kathy's mother. And I guess I am thankful for knowing Chet because I know Chip. And I've got 3 wonderful grandsons, all related.
My 2 words are Thanksgiving Monday. You described what a big deal Christmas, planning for Christmas is. You discussed how Chet spent so much care and attention buying gifts, like a P&G purchasing department. Day after Thanksgiving, he was on the internet, going to stores. And on Monday, the packages would roll in to our house.
Oh, yes.
Because he couldn't send them to Madeira. So I would get this call from Mary Jane. Did you buy a laptop computer? And when the Xbox arrived in the afternoon, we all knew where they were coming from. Sent to our house so the boys wouldn't see them. We hid them away until the day before Christmas, when we would transport them to Madeira for a surprise Christmas opening. This is just one of many, many memories I have of Chet.
That's okay. I'm Penny's boyfriend. And I new friends with Uncle Dennis, and this is Caden, Penny's son, and we're just really happy to be here.
Great.
Sounds like a wonderful man.
Luke, do you want to share a word about your granddad?
I'm Luke. My word for him would be tenacious. It's kind of in everything he did. He seemed like he was always out there to get the problem done, solve all of his issues. No problem he couldn't conquer.
Julie.
I have one word to say, and it really encompasses everything we've all said, and it's devotion. Chet had devotion to his family, his friends, his bridge players, to all of you. And thank you so much for coming. I love you all.
So I have just a few more words and we'll be finished, and we have a lunch to follow. We hope you will stay and share more memories of my dad with us, and as long as you can. But a wise person once wrote that parents give us roots and they give us wings. They bring us into the world, or they take us into their home. They provide a foundation and they give us the tools to find our way. Though we may have grown up and grown away, there's still something very special about sharing your victories and commiserating your defeats with your parents. And even if the relationship might have been challenging at different moments, we never stray very far from the promise that home is where our hearts are. Losing a parent leaves an empty place in our hearts. And we go to the phone to call, because let's face it, we had to call because Dad wasn't going to call us. And we remember the past. We wonder how we're going to continue without that smile, that laugh, the voice, the squint, and mostly the belief that family is our most important treasure. Julie. Family is what God chooses for us. But a spouse, a life partner, your soulmate, is what you choose for yourself. The relationships between partners and spouses is a singular experience. It's the person that you took into our heart. It's the person that you pledged to share those good times and the bad, the victories and the defeats, the dreams and the realities of living day to day with someone who knows you by heart. The loss of a spouse is what reminds us every day what was and what is no more. It's that empty space in the bed, that newspaper that now goes unread, the empty recliner that you never wanted in the first place, the iPad full of pictures of travels and happy times, and a home that's stuffed with memories everywhere you look. There's no one to plan the next trip with, drag to the gym, enjoy Costco, or to say, have I told you, honey, that I love you today? Every day. I know I speak for all of my family when I say thank you. Dad was blessed to fall in love with two amazing women in his life, and we feel lucky to have you and your family in ours. Chet, Dad, Grandpa remains a part of all of us. We are now the representatives and the ambassadors of his legacy. He gave us wonderful gifts of kindness, tolerance, strength, acceptance, and love. He showed us how to live with challenges and struggles and how to survive. While not every moment was easy and not every memory is etched in gold, in the final analysis, my dad gave every one of us every inch of what he had to offer. A life infused with love has consequences that reach beyond time, ensuring that names, places, and memories of what was, still are, and always will be. They are not dead. They will never die. We will be forever changed, forever altered by this loss. And that is how it should be. The intensity of this hurt bears testimony to the depth and the meaning of this relationship in our life. Jake, can you help me out here, buddy? Okay. So Jake is going to have for everyone, I want you to take one of these. It's a handkerchief. Dad never went anywhere without a real handkerchief. And there's a little charm on it, which is the sign language for I love you. And I want you to take one of these to remember that you always need a handkerchief. We always need to say I love you to the people that we love. To live life with honor, to love your family fiercely, take time to watch a good TV program, and to celebrate the spirit of Christmas in your life all year long. AJ, would you please close us out in prayer?
God, we're grateful for today. God, we're grateful for our family. God, we are grateful for our Chet. We're grateful for the way that he's impacted, touched so many, all of our lives, directly, indirectly. Lord, we lift up his memory today. We give you glory. Lord, we give you thanks. Lord, I pray for your Holy Spirit, the great comforter, to be present in the hearts of all who grieve today. Lord, we lift up our lives to you, and we pray that Chet's life would serve as a reminder, God, of how we should approach each day, and what we should do with the things that you've given us. And we're grateful for him. So, God, today we thank you for Chet. Thank you, Jesus, our Lord. Amen.
So we have lots of food, so we hope you'll stay, share more memories of Dad, and thank you again so much for coming. It means so much. Okay, does everyone want to see my family?